Welcome to the Cool Story Bryan podcast. My name is Bryan McConnell, and today I'm here with a returning guest and one of my best friends, Russell.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
I was wondering, I usually start every podcast with, all right, but I was wondering if I should do that for this one, because this one it tends to be on more of the darker side, or that's at least how I imagine it will end up going. But the reason why is last week I ended up attending a funeral of, I want to say a friend, but I think friend has to be kind of a mutual relationship. A friendship has to be mutual. And I don't know what this guy would have thought of me exactly. There is a history there, and we both went to a really small town, so we ended up knowing each other, of course. And,
small school.
Yeah. And so there's not very many people in my high school, and he may have been the first one out of all of the surrounding classes to pass away.
Yeah. How did he die, actually?
Well, every death is sad, but in the obituary, the family put, or prior to the obituary, the family said something along the lines of, what was it? He died unexpectedly, something along those terms. Now, I Googled the term, whatever the actual term was. I think it was died unexpectedly. And I Googled what that meant, and sources like Urban Dictionary and whatnot basically said that it usually means suicide or an overdose.
Okay.
So, talk around town, since it is a small town, is that he died from drinking. He either got really drunk and ended up smothering himself, or just had too much poison in his system.
Well, it's possible, but it's a thing that happens. I think like Jimi Hendrix died that way. That like basically, if you're too passed out and you're too drunk, and then your body just says, "Hey, I got poison. I got to get rid of that," and then you aspirate or asphyxiate on the vomit. You know? And so it could be something like that. I mean, it's kind of macabre to really think about it. I mean, so he passed away from something along those lines. Yeah. Basically. Right?
It really doesn't matter how he passed away. I mean, it could have been anything. My main focus is the service. Like, obviously funerals are supposed to be a celebration of life. That's what it even said in the little program that they give you.
Well, they say that, but I mean, I don't know, man. It seems to me like, I'll let you go ahead and finish the story with this, but like, I'm not a huge fan of funerals, so I'll just go ahead and jump in after you tell everything that happened with it.
And I'm sure based on your previous career and experience, you've been to a lot more funerals than I have. Yeah,
well, go ahead and finish with this, and I'll tell you more about that.
Okay. So yes, back to celebration of life. I like the idea of that it's a celebration of life, and usually after the funeral service, people usually get together and end up telling stories.
Right.
More often than not, stories about the person that ended up passing away. So I like the idea that it's a celebration of life. This funeral, however, it didn't quite seem like that. I mean, there was still the talking afterward that was nice, but the whole service, it was not personal at all. It was a very strict Catholic funeral.
So all the pomp and circumstance that goes along with that, and there's so much tradition, the history and stuff. Yeah,
of course.
So it takes anything Catholic takes. It's a 3-hour affair.
And what was really sad about this as well is the kid who died. I don't really want to mention his name.
Yeah, let's not.
The kid who died was homosexual.
Yeah,
and his husband was obviously at the funeral too.
Right.
This is a small town funeral where 90% of the people in this town are Christian or Catholic, and obviously they're not very fond of the idea of a man marrying another man. So,
well, I think it'd be important to point out first off that that's not necessarily true. It may be the broad majority, but to paint everybody with a broad brush, but generally speaking, if you do want to get down to brass tacks, if you read the Bible, Christianity, it's against homosexuality. It is there. It's in the Bible, and people have different things they say in different ways. They kind of cherry pick the argument to say, well, maybe it's not so bad or whatever. But the bottom line is, it does have things in the Bible that are against it, and the kind of classic Christianity or Judeo-Christian kind of view is against homosexuality.
Yeah.
You know,
And I'm not saying that every individual person at the funeral was against that.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
And it is sad because there are a lot of very nice Catholic and Christian people out there.
Most of them are.
That are perfectly accepting of the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So based on what I did hear, there were a few people that that don't like the idea of homosexuality.
Sure. I mean, you can read people like you're sitting around looking around, and there's people that seem uncomfortable, and you're gonna have that stuff, you know. And
I was surprised that in the obituary they even put that he that he was survived by his husband. I was surprised that they even put that in there. Based on what I know, I just wasn't expecting that.
Right.
So
it's kind of that. It's hard to describe. It's this kind of way of can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. Kind of a type of thinking, I think, and that's probably why. Or I mean, that's probably why you would suspect that they would just, you know, if they didn't have a way they wanted to bring it up, they would just kind of avoid it, right? Avoid the topic. But I think that's the right thing to do, though. That he is survived by his husband, who is grieving. You know,
and you have to do that. You have to put that in there.
I think
if you didn't, that's a sin right there, well, in my opinion. But so yes. And right after that paragraph where it said he was survived by his husband and his family members, there was one line. So it was broken up into paragraphs, and there was one line after that saying he was a very strict, devout Catholic, of course. Just to completely negate everything that was homosexually mentioned prior to that, or mentioned that had to do with homosexuality. Anyway, I don't think that's the reason. I'm probably looking at this way too much.
Yeah, it's hard to say. There might be a traditional thing they put for Catholic people or something, where like they're kind of standard form things that will go along with those sorts of things. There's a lot of ceremony and a lot of tradition involved with, especially funerals and like marriages and things like that. And so I'm sure that it's probably something to do with, it's important to put that he was a devout Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first thing first is Kristen and I both walk into the church, and he's sitting right there in his casket, wide open.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with open caskets. If that's what they wished and that's what the family wants, then that's perfectly fine. But it is kind of strange that the first time you see a dead body, or not the first time, but this wasn't the first time that I've seen a dead body, but when you immediately see a dead body that's done up, you immediately think of how good of a cosmetologist the mortician is, basically. So that was kind of running through my mind. Like, no one looks alive.
You do nice work here. It looks good. The body, it looks good.
No one in a casket looks alive, but that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to make them look alive and asleep.
Right.
But sadly, that's out of all of the cases that I've seen, that's never been the situation.
Well, yeah, because I mean, they can get it close, but there's so much that happens post-mortem when you die. You know, there's so much things that immediately start happening, and the breakdown of your body and stuff like that. It depends on how long that he was dead for before they got the body somewhere. You know, and so those processes, I don't know a whole lot about it. I know a little, but you just can't replicate an alive-looking person. You know what I mean? It's just because you have blood flowing through you. You have just all kinds of stuff. You know, your muscles are tensed in certain ways naturally and things like that. So you're never going to get it. You're
not going to get that pinkness that flowing blood provides. Right. It's providing oxygen to your skin cells and whatnot. So, I want to talk about the priest a little bit, because it was a young priest, good-looking guy, probably around my age, and some of the things he said. Let's see, what were some of the things he said? He was basically spouting. It was the typical Catholic mass. So he was basically spouting that we're all sinners.
Well, that's the whole basis of the Christian faith, is that we're born in sin. We are saved by the Jesus sacrifice and all that, right?
And everything we do must be strictly for God. Like, everything we do must be in the direction that it would please God, basically.
Right. Be oriented around,
And he also, now again, I might be thinking too much into this, but when he was listing some of the sins that we are all victim of, he mentioned sexuality, and he also used the term lust. So out of 3 sins that he listed, he said sex and lust were 2 of them. Now, when you're giving a funeral for someone who is homosexual and you're basically accusing them of being a sinner, and 2 of the main sins were sex and lust, I don't know. I just don't think that's...
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting, first off, that, and again, I'm not that familiar with Catholicism and their traditions and rituals, but it seems to me to be kind of weird that we're talking about any of that kind of stuff during a funeral at all.
Exactly.
But I mean, hey, maybe it's a thing they normally do. If it's not, and the guy, the priest did this because he knew the guy was gay, your friend was gay, and he's basically trying to kind of make a lesson out of it, that's fucked.
Yeah, exactly.
That's real fucked, because that's basically kind of, it's like a passive aggressive way of basically putting a gun to your head, being like, guess what? He's burning in hell. You want to join him? Get your shit right and make sure you come to church.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons I'm so against religion, man. And I don't mean to harp on it, but I am so against religion. I really, really am.
Yeah, the organized religion.
Organized religion in general, but also just telling people you can believe stuff without empirical evidence. Because that's where you start getting into... It starts getting into the gray zone of how do you know things? You know what I mean? And I believe something because it's faith. Well, great, but I don't know, man. It's case in point here. You have a guy that, if he did do this, presuming he did, like, because of your friend's soul's state, basically it made it okay for him. You know what I mean? It justified it.
Yeah. It
justified a vile action, like bringing up someone's sexuality or saying there's something wrong with them, or in front of bereaved people that are all, like, very sad because someone they love is dead and they died young, and it's shocking and it's surprising, and to be going through all of that and to take someone in that emotional state and then be like, hey, guess what? Let's talk about something that's not a comfortable, even an uncomfortable subject, right? Like, and that's the thing about it for me, is it's like that his belief in this system then in his mind justified that for him.
Yeah.
To say these things in front of these hurting people. And I don't like that.
Because it's his religion.
Right. And it's so taboo.
This is what he does as a job. He goes around and says you shouldn't do these things and you should do these other things.
And it's so taboo to talk about religion. It's one of those things where you can't bring it up, right? And it's like, but in my mind, and I'm not saying I'm right. I think I am, but I'm not objectively right. But to me, it seems that he's a traveling snake oil salesman who takes on these times it's advantageous for him. It's easier to sell his narrative, because especially you're thinking about death, you're thinking about what happens after I die, and trying to get past the process of, what if it's just lights out when you're dead, and just even trying to grapple with those kinds of thoughts. And then here he comes, well, guess what? I have the answer. Man, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah. And before we get too personally set on this one priest, I do want to say I very well may have been reading into this too much.
Possible.
This could be one of those things that he says at every single funeral that he does. It could just be a script that he's memorized, and it may not have anything to do with this particular dead person.
Sure.
But just based on it was, I guess it's one of those things where you had to be there. And
and you felt it though, kind of a dog whistle kind of thing.
I did.
You definitely picked up on that. See, to me, that seems like the more likely answer, because it's like he doesn't want to come right out and be like, "Hey, homosexuality is a sin. If you do this shit, you're going to go to hell." But if he's sitting there talking about sins that are what do they call it, like original sin, and the sins that are inherent and intrinsic. So that's another thing that's messed up about Christianity. It says that you're broke, but you need to fix yourself. And the only way you can fix yourself is through this deal. And
you're not going to get fixed until you do die.
Yeah, it tells people that they're intrinsically wrong, that they're intrinsically bad.
Yeah.
For example, like this guy being gay, right? He didn't just wake up one day and pick who he was attracted to, or what types of features in a person he's attracted to.
Yeah.
That's one thing that you just find out about yourself. I like tall chicks, and I like tall chicks with big eyes and dark hair. These are features that I'm attracted to, right? And so that's one of the reasons I'm like, I don't like this, because you're telling this natural thing, and it's a big thing in the gay community. I have a lot of gay friends, and it's a big thing in the gay community. A lot of substance abuse issues. It's not surprising that if you died from overdosing basically on alcohol, because they deal with so much rejection. Imagine the core thing about you, you know what I mean? Your sexuality is one of your core things, and to have that be told, someone to tell you, you know what, that's wrong about you, and you need to try to fix that, or else God doesn't love you or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but
No,
yeah, so you picked up on that, and that's what I'm talking about. And so he doesn't want to come out and say it, but it's kind of everybody's thinking it, right?
Sexuality is just one of those things where people naturally don't want to talk about it as it is because it's a very personal, intimate moment between two or more people,
right? Well,
or one,
right? Or especially in this culture, right? Yeah, like especially in this culture.
But it's important to be able to talk about that. Now,
Sure.
how is a poor kid that grew up in a small town that's against homosexuality?
Maybe the only gay kid in town.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
Right.
But that also brings me back to the priest. Now, this priest also mentioned that he was celibate. I don't know if that means he was a virgin and he's never had sex, or if he recently converted from...
No, he said your friend was celibate?
Oh, no. The priest said he was celibate himself.
That's part of the deal. That's part of the rules.
Okay.
They have to. Catholic priests, they don't marry and they're celibate.
Yeah, and I knew that was the case for most, but there are some priests that are married, right? Or is
not Catholic priests.
Oh, not Catholic.
There might be other ones that kind of look that way, like Episcopalians, I believe, will wear somewhere like the what's it called? It's been a while since I grew up in religion, and so it's been so long. I'm starting to kind of forget stuff. But
it's that
there's
little white
the habit. Yeah, some of them will wear that kind of stuff, and I believe Episcopalians and maybe some other ones will do that. But no, I know for sure Catholic priests do not marry, do not have sex, or they're not supposed to.
I see.
And that's and same with nuns as well.
Okay,
you're married to the Lord.
Yeah, I was very confused by most of the stuff going on. Imagine going to some sort of ceremony that many people all of the people there have done many times before,
right?
And you have no idea what's going on.
Right.
They're getting up and sitting down. They're singing songs, and I've been to church before. I mean, I was a lot younger,
right?
But I honestly had no idea what was going on.
Catholic church especially. I've been to Catholic church many times.
Yeah,
it's definitely like it's a whole routine because it's all steeped in tradition. There's a reason for all of it. It has to do with Catholic history, basically.
Yeah. So there were moments that I had no idea what to do, and one of those moments was sharing the peace or something like that.
Oh, the host taking communion. Like you go up and get a cracker.
Yeah, but you shake your neighbor's hand.
Oh, yeah, it's the extension of peace. Yeah, you say peace be with you, or peace. Yeah,
and then they say also with you.
Yeah,
I was just like I shook the first dude I shook his hand, and I was like, "What's up, dude?" Like,
right,
it's just like one of those things. Yeah.
What's up, Jesus? Yeah.
So I felt like such an idiot, but
well, no, but you shouldn't. I mean, I know it's always one of those things when you're doing something that everybody else knows, like it's clearly a thing they regularly do, and you're like, I don't. Hey, hi, Bryan. Yeah, it's what are you gonna do, man? That's just
and you can't help but feel like an idiot in that situation because you're outnumbered. Everyone else there.
Well, you're the odd man out. Everyone's looking at me. Yeah.
But had I been a Catholic, it would have been no big deal.
Well, sure.
And it still wasn't a big deal. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
So, a handsome young priest who claims to be celibate. Now, why is a handsome young man whose natural inclination is to go out and spread his seed automatically fully devoted to this idea of celibacy? And now, I'm not accusing this guy, but there is a small chance there that he himself may be homosexual.
Well, okay, so
as well.
First off, you're going to get into conjecture here because we don't have enough information to go off of, right?
Of course, and I'm not accusing this one person. I'm just saying there have been cases of that.
Oh my God! Well, the Catholic Church especially has an entire history. I mean, like, come on, recent history, all the child molestation cases and the priests and all this stuff. There's something unnatural about turning off the sex drive, right? Or not? You can't turn off the sex drive, but basically saying no to it. Now, we could presume all kinds of things, but I think even if you look at it like this, I don't want to
presume. I more want to let's just imagine. Let's imagine that this is a case where the priest doing a funeral for someone who is homosexual that passed away is also himself homosexual. That's possible. Even more messed up.
Well, sure. I mean, the hypocrisy is there, or even if he's heterosexual, I'd say the same level of hypocrisy. If he's having sex with women or a woman.
Oh yeah.
And he's not supposed to be. It doesn't really matter at that point, right? Like you're not supposed to be having sex, but you're having sex. Is it double bad if you're gay? I don't know. These rules start to get kind of ruly. You know what I mean? And but the thing about, let's even say the best case scenario. Let's say that he's not sleeping with anybody else, and let's say that this is part of his devotion to God as he sees it. That basically he has these drives, but he's fighting them back as part of kind of like a gift to God, or kind of a show of seriousness to God and a commitment, like a sacrifice he's making. That's possible.
Yeah,
that's kind of the best case scenario. But even at that still is kind of messed up, because what kind of system of I don't know the word. Like, what kind of system are you making here where that's what we're telling people? You know what I mean? Like, you need to, and what sort of a God would create you to have these drives, and then you'd have to not fulfill them to, it's the whole thing's just,
You have to fight your inner urges
Right.
your entire life until death. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me. I don't understand it.
And there are some people who are kind of asexual too. There are people who don't really have much of a sex drive, if one at all.
Yeah.
And also entirely possible. You know, we don't know. You know what I mean? But yeah, it does. At some point, you do have to ask yourself, okay, so like, why would you choose this path?
Yeah.
But you know, as someone who's indoctrinated in religion from a very early age, as early as I can remember, up until probably my early to mid 20s, where I kind of was like, all right, this is bullshit. I understand to an extent. I do, like the level of commitment and the level of thinking it's real. And if you've never known anything else your whole life, I mean, commonly Catholic people are baptized Catholic as babies. They grew up Catholic their whole life. Now, let's say his family is very devout. It's a very big thing to be a priest in a family, especially in devout Catholic communities. And it could be something along those lines, you know? But again, he could just be a fucking hypocrite. Well, I mean,
we're all hypocrites.
Well, sure.
But so yeah, I don't know where I was really going with that. I just was imagining.
Give a bad taste in your mouth. What you're saying, like the whole thing didn't feel right. Yeah.
I was just imagining what if this really was the case, and how much worse would that actually be? And I'm not saying that was the case at all. I have no reason to believe that he was homosexual, the priest that was.
Right.
But anyway, another thing that I didn't like about the funeral is there was nothing personal said about this person that died. Nothing personal. It was pretty much a Catholic mass.
Right. Yeah. Just a straight up ceremony.
Yeah. And I've heard that that's common.
It may be. I've never gone to a Catholic funeral.
This is at least the second one that I've been to that I could think of. I mean, the first one was still a little bit more personal though, about the person that died, which would have been nice because Kristen went with me. She obviously didn't know this guy.
Right.
And I asked her on the way home because we were talking about the service.
Yeah.
And I asked her, so just based on the service, do you know anything about my friend that passed away? Do you know anything?
What did you gather?
Yeah. Did you gather any information about him? Did you hear any fun stories? Did any of his family members go up and speak and you learned something from that? The answer to all these questions obviously were no. She didn't learn a thing about him. She said, and I quote, the most information she got about this person was from the little program that they handed out with the obituary and whatnot and all of the list of the pallbearers and everything.
Right.
I guess they call those a funeral program. I had to look up what those were called because there's a lot of different names for them. And a program just sounds weird. It sounds like you're attending a concert or something.
Well, in a way, it kind of is, right? Like, or like a play program or schedule, or any of those theater kind of things.
Yeah.
Because there are like the stages, the parts of the thing, and they list that out, and it's just part of it. Like same with wedding invitations and stuff. A wedding program, they'll have just this thing. I guess maybe it's so everybody can be on track with what's going on. I don't know. It's tradition. Again, a lot of tradition involved in this stuff. You know.
And I don't want to make this an anti-religion podcast.
Sure.
Or episode.
That's just my personal opinion.
These are all my personal opinions as well. And these are all just hypothetical series of theories and whatnot.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess instead of making this anti-religion, because we don't want to just throw all of Catholicism under the bus, although it does have its red flags.
I guess it would be, my thing is, it's one of those things where well, I don't know. I mean, that wasn't really kind of the focus of the podcast for this time anyways. And we could go on for hours about that stuff, about religion in general or Catholicism in general. But I think it's important to remember that it's important to separate the ideas from the people. You know, now whether or not the people take actions on those that are negative, that's kind of a different thing, I suppose. But, you know, I'm not saying anything's wrong with Catholic people. Because I used to be a Christian. You know, to me, I feel like I was fed bullshit for the best reasons. My mom thought that this was real, and you know, and that's why she taught me that it was. And, you know, and I don't have any kind of quarrel with anybody that, you know.
I guess it's just more. I guess what I wanted to more get at is if you're gonna throw a funeral for someone, or if you're gonna have a funeral for someone, I think instead of focusing on the negatives or focusing on the religion aspect of it,
right,
that instead of doing that kind of stuff, focus more on the positives.
Right.
Focus more on the enlightening moments about this person.
You know, that actually transitions perfectly into what we were going to talk about earlier when you were mentioning about how I've been to a lot of funerals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So just quick backstory for, so people know what I'm talking about. I'm ex-military, and I was in the infantry in the Army. And that's, for those who don't know what the infantry is, it's basically the ground fighters, the guys that go in and actually find, close with, and kill the enemy. And so a lot of my friends died doing that when I was in Iraq. I had 7 friends total pass away. And we stopped going to the funerals. I can't remember which guy it was, but there were several of us who were just like, I can't fucking do this shit anymore. I can't go to this anymore. I can't see this, because you would get these colonels that didn't know the guy, or the colonel, like the battalion commander. He would get up there. He didn't know the guy, and talk like he did, and it was just this kind of like, there's a feeling of kind of just fakeness to it. And again, another kind of where it was just like a step by step, here's what we're going to do. They get up and say nice things, and it's cool. They say nice things about them, but it's disingenuous. We know you're full of shit, dude. You're sitting here talking about our friend as though you knew him, and you didn't.
Yeah.
And I think one of the hardest ones with that too was also watching my company commander. Company's about 100 guys. It's someone I know, and he knows his men. It's like his men. He's like the way you'd imagine it in movies and stuff like that. The company commander is the guy that's like, he's on the ground with you.
Yeah.
And it's the heartbreak in his face. Like when he would just read what he wrote down, and like it was like almost flat and monotone because he's trying not to cry, and he just would read it out and just be done. And then you get this guy, and so with the funerals and stuff like that, like I try to avoid them. I'll go to funerals for like my wife, for example, her grandfather passed away a while back, and I went to that because I need to be there for support, and it's my responsibility as her husband to be there. But if I have the choice in things, like I don't like going to funerals just for that. What's the one thing? Sometimes I have like a memorial service where everybody kind of gets together, and I'll go to those. But like what you talk about, the rigid kind of almost a play or act of a funeral, I don't like it. And so whenever I die, I've told all my friends and family, I just want a giant bonfire, everyone to drink and smoke and tell stories about me and the times they had with me, and to just have fun, and just try to be happy.
I think everyone wants that for your funeral.
Well, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I think maybe some people don't think about it too.
If we are somehow able to witness our own funeral, like as some sort of floating energy or floating force,
or consciousness of any kind.
Yeah.
I hope there is. I hope there is some kind of.
It would be really nice to be able to see everyone, that all your loved members and family members and whatnot. But if there's nothing personally said about you and things along that nature, it would almost be sort of like a very anticlimactic ending to what was your hopefully beautiful life, like wonderful
right. Like,
life.
did you have any impact on people? Would you hear these stories, or maybe ones you forgot? Like all kinds of things. Yeah, and that's, and especially in this context. I mean, let's say that there is consciousness after death, and let's say your friend was sitting there. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the priest kind of backhandedly kind of talking about his lifestyle that was wrong in front of his grieving husband, watching him there, couldn't do anything, couldn't hold him, couldn't say anything to him, and have to sit there and watch that? And then that's, to me, that's, like, I see why you wanted to bring it up and talk about this on the podcast.
And it's very difficult. It's not difficult. It's not that it's difficult to talk about. It's difficult to express exactly what it is that someone is feeling during a time of grieving like that.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like, dealing with death is one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life. And it's awful. And then to pile on to that, you know what I mean? It's just, man. But, maybe this guy, I think that on a positive note, maybe the guy thinks that he's doing, maybe he really believes all this is true, for real. And he thinks that you can go to hell for this, for eternity. And he's thinking, you know what, I need to try to save people. I know this is a hard time, but maybe this is the best time to get their attention, because I don't want them to go to hell. That's a possibility too, you know? But still, though, man, I just, definitely, just even hearing about it kind of gets me kind of angry. But
all right, well, thank you for listening to the podcast, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Bryan out.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Russ.
Oh yeah, of course. If you want to re-record that, we can. We can start over.